Welcome to the Quantum Biology Collective podcast, where we break down the practical strategies of this emerging science, starting with healthy light habits and going wherever the quantum superhighway takes us. This is your host, executive and life coach Meredith Oak, with a quick reminder that podcasts are conversations, not consultations, and definitely not medical advice. We're here for informational purposes only. To follow up with our amazing guests, please do check out the show notes, and to stay in the loop with the QBC podcast, join our email list, also linked in the show notes. So in last week's episode, we looked at physical pain and the quantum healing strategies that can help us recover from that or build up our resilience to experiencing it in the first place. This week, we're looking at a different kind of pain, a psychic pain, the pain of addiction. My guest today is Andeea Rae. She is a licensed addiction counselor, and she is also certified in applied quantum biology. So she walks us through the difference between a bad habit and a real addiction, the phases of change that a person needs to go through in order to recover from addiction, or to change a bad habit. Phases of change can apply to everybody. And then she really gets into her new area of research, which is how circadian optimization can support people in early recovery. And some of the insights that she has are really interesting. And she's noticed like an overlap in the symptoms of post-acute withdrawal syndrome and severe circadian disruption. So Andeea is now teaching other addiction counselors about the importance of light in early recovery. And she's here today to tell us all about it. So her work is amazing. Go to the show notes if you'd like to learn more from her or work with her, and enjoy this episode. I certainly did. Andeea, I'm so excited for this conversation.
Hello, Meredith. Me too.
Good. It's going to be super fun. I'm so glad to have you here. So Andeea, you have like a very interesting background. You're an expert in the recovery field, and you are now also certified in applied quantum biology. So walk us through how you came into your profession and how you came to integrate quantum biology into it.
Yes. So I'm going to keep the story nice and short here. So I'm almost 16 years in recovery myself. So that's how thank you. That's how I became a counselor. Actually, a piece of my story I do want to share. I didn't even know about the rooms of recovery, and I'm from addiction until I was about 8 years into recovery. So, wow. Yes. So, I feel like my entrance into like the quantum world was kind of the same too, because I got little hints of it probably a good 5 years ago that I was implementing, but then I really had an opportunity to hone in on things and know the meaning of what was happening and why I was benefiting so much. So, any which way, I also had a co-occurring eating disorder, and my drug of choice, or drug of no choice, as we like to say, was methamphetamine. So and I used for 12 years, and now I'm, almost 6 years in recovery. And I got my master's in addiction, and that's where I met my husband. He's also works in this field. And the probably 10 years into my recovery, I went on this journey of, I was still doing a lot of yo-yo dieting in my recovery, and started eating keto, started listening to lots of carnivore people in the carnivore space and whatnot. And I was doing some work with a coach who focused everything was toxin-free living. And that piece is what led me originally into the quantum space, but I didn't know that it was that. All I really learned with that was the importance of like blacking out my bedroom at night, and that really improved my sleep. I knew about blue blockers, didn't get them. I was just like, the main thing I need to do is make sure all the little lights are off and blah, blah, blah. And I knew that was seeing a light in the middle of the night, like was interrupting my melatonin. just doing that activity, it did improve some things, but I still had other health issues going on. So that part of my story into my long-term recovery, and this is, the target audience I want to help, is people who are in long-term recovery, still dealing with gut issues, still having, for me, I had IBS and I definitely had a sugar addiction. Food addiction was going on. I had an inability to lose weight. I had a lot of joint pain. I would have bouts of hair fall or hair loss. And I was a chronic yo-yo dieter until I knew better. And, in also my story, there's, some anxiety, and was diagnosed with ADHD, and then big trauma, little trauma, kind of a gambit of things.
Mm-hmm.
And my quantum healing really started about 5 years ago, but I've really been able to hone in on it the last year, I would say. I've really been able to dial things in and know the exact reason why I was doing the things I was doing and what was leading to me starting to feel better, because I still wasn't feeling the greatest. And I'm not one of those stories where, I'm very grateful I didn't have, an autoimmune or cancer or anything else I was healing, but there was a plethora of symptoms. And that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today.
Yes.
Is, a lot of symptoms piling on top of each other, making us feel like we're going crazy.
Yeah. And then we kind of get used to it and we forget what it feels like to feel good. Or we feel less crappy than we used to. So we're like, oh, this is good enough, but actually it's not really. And so I'm so interested in your story because I'm hearing that you've gone through all these different layers of healing and recovery in your life. And I really believe that we're kind of led to the door of healing that we need most in that moment. And we go through it and we integrate what we need, and then we're led to the next door. And so you started through the door of recovery from addiction, which led you to recovery from eating disorders, trauma, and then all of these other gray area health issues, I call them, right? Where it's not a crisis that the medical system can do anything about, but we're also not living in a place where we feel mostly good.
Right.
And so, okay. So there was the addiction recovery, the trauma recovery, and then the physical recovery, and all needing different things and all leading you to ultimately find incorporating light and circadian rhythm and all this other stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And
so I'm
glad you picked up on that, because there's a lot of pieces of my story that, I'm not going to go into detail today, but if anybody wants to listen to all of those details, I did recently post that on my podcast and they can go there and listen to that.
Great.
But yeah,
tell us the name of your podcast.
Quantum Recovery.
Quantum Recovery. Oh, I love that.
Yes.
Okay. Everyone go subscribe right now. Go hit pause and go subscribe to Andea's podcast. Okay.
Yes. So
Continue.
that, I'm glad you picked up on that, because yes, there was a lot of healing and work I did in the mental health realm. And once I did find rooms of recovery. So there was a lot, I was always searching for the thing, just like I, was yo-yo dieting for the right way I'm supposed to eat. And now I've gotten a lot of clarity around that. So the quantum space really opened up me touching on the true issues that I might have touched on when I was doing mental health therapy, but I didn't do deep dives into my belief system. And that part has been really huge for me as well. So there's so much more.
Say more about that, the deep dive into your belief system.
Well, there's a vibration that we vibrate at when we keep ourselves in certain feelings. So I had a lot of shame and fear that was still coming up for me. And I was being triggered by it, even though I did a lot of work around it. And there was a lot of things that I addressed. That doesn't mean I'm not triggered by certain things in my present state. And once I learned about emotions being at a certain vibration, on a quantum level, I took that very seriously, very, very seriously. And I started to think about, okay, do I still have fear around this? Because fear is actually one of the lowest. It is, I think, the lowest. And shame's down there, doubt, anxiety. The wave is really wide, and we want to vibrate faster, and we want to vibrate up by love and joy and happiness. So I've started to really go back into like some of the work I did and make sure that my actions and how I live is in alignment with how I want to feel. So I'm thinking about the person that I am today, the confident person who is recovered, if you will, is not staying in a place where I'm labeling myself, because that imprints also on our water. And yeah, there's a lot of layers of it, but it is something that I took very seriously when I learned about the vibrations, because I wanted to make sure I was vibrating high.
Yeah.
And living there.
Yeah. And
Because I
so I
used to live
wanted,
in shame
yeah.
and fear, and it was easy to
Yes.
do. And that was my comfort
Yeah.
zone, honestly. Having a pity party with myself. Oh, poor me. I'm never going to be like her. Always comparing myself. All of those kinds of things feed into that, like me addressing a new belief system as well. So, yeah.
Yes. Okay. I love that. And I just want to talk for 1 second because, yes, we do, like the deep spiritual work required to like not live at those lower vibrations. However, we are, we're humans. So the feelings, they come. So tell us sort of, when the fear pops up, and we're talking obviously about, sort of not fear, like, oh, there's a train coming and I'm stuck on the tracks. Like, the other kind of fear, like nobody loves me or whatever.
Yeah.
Or something terrible is going to happen any minute, even though we don't have evidence for it. So these feelings come up. How do you, what's your approach to, not suppressing them, not making yourself feel bad for having them, but sort of how do you handle it when, life gives you a little shame dessert?
Yes. So, well, one thing that changes my vibration pretty quickly is listening to music. But now that I just the awareness of understanding that I'm sitting in a feeling and I don't want to sit in that like lower feeling for too long, is like I have a better awareness now how more quickly I need to shift it. I used to just do, I would let myself feel the feelings. Maybe I would journal about it. Well, not that journaling doesn't help, but for me, journaling kept me in that space. But I do like to still do that just to get it out if I need to. If it's something pretty intense, I will do that if needed. But going outside
Yeah.
will change it really quickly. And I have so much abundance in my life, focusing on all of the abundance and gratitude. Those things, as simple as they sound, they really do change my mood in a very quickly. Like I was just telling you before we got on here, I'm just going to be full transparency, everyone. Last night I was like, why do I feel a little bit nervous? And then I was like, I'm not nervous. I'm super excited. Our body actually registers nervousness and excitement the same way. So it's also about how we're labeling it in our mind. So focusing on that as well. So if I'm triggered or fearful of something, or find myself comparing myself to someone else, allowing myself to just to question that and I like,
Right.
no, that I don't have to do that. And when that does come up, I know that is something that I need to look at in myself. Like, why am I questioning that I'm not good enough? Where's that coming from? Because I know I'm good enough. I know what I'm
Yeah.
talking about. And I have lots of proof for it. And, it takes time to get to a place like this. And I do a lot of work to now realize the importance. And, when we first learn things like, and also when I was counseling and first teaching people about things, they would hear it, but you got to be in the right stage of change.
Yeah.
It's all about stage of change too. And I might have not been ready to change certain things about myself. And my life is presenting that I can't live in that place no more if I want to help people. If I want to help people overcome and I want them to live in long-term recovery, recovered, and not constantly thinking that they need to fix themselves, that they are perfect just the way they are, I have to have my shit together.
You got to be living that.
Yeah, I gotta live it. And I'm
we
living
gotta live it.
I'm living it so I can help other people do it. And that's, very important to me, because I know that there's so much healing that people want to do and need to do. And I want to help them do it. And it should be a living proof example that it's very possible. And we don't have to live in the old stuff. Not that the old stuff isn't going to come up. It will. But we can move through it way quicker. And we don't need to keep it in our identity.
Right. Yeah. And I love that. Like there can be that you can like feel the shame spiral coming on and you get to a place where it's like, yeah, no, I'm not going to go there. I see you. I feel you. I'm going to go for a walk. Yeah.
I used to, put that on like a
robe. Just jump down into the vortex. Yeah.
Yes.
The shame vortex is so powerful.
Just hope I wake up the next day in a better mood. Well, I don't live in it that long anymore.
Exactly. Just hoping something external changes so I can change. And also, like, what I came to realize for myself was that it was a great way to not have to take any risks or do anything or put myself out there or live my life, because, it can hold you back. Okay. So I love this. And I appreciate that you're doing this work and helping people to come out of that space. And I really appreciate that you're living it, because I find too, like on the quantum level, sometimes what I've been really noticing lately is like you spend time around a person and sometimes I'm like, I don't remember a word that person said, but I just feel better having spent some time with them. like,
in their energy.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Right. And other people, it's like not, it goes the other way. So, all right. So this is where you are today, which is like a beautiful place to be sharing your message from. So help for people who are listening, who don't have a background of addiction. I'd love for you to just help us understand how to tell the difference between like someone who's like stuck in a bad habit, stuck in a rut, like they, something went wrong in their life. Now they're drinking a little too much, but it'll probably change if that situation changes, versus somebody who is addicted. And I think sometimes like there are certain drugs that we associate more with addiction and certain things that are like, oh, they're just smoking pot or they're just drinking. Right. And how if you're just a person in the world or a health coach, particularly, right, you're going to see a lot of different types of people show up, how to help understand where a person is between a bad habit and an addiction.
Yeah. Well, the short of it is that for bad habits, we can control them. Mm-hmm. And when we're addicted, we're out of control. We can't control our addiction. And another key piece is it affecting your life in some way? Is your drinking keeping you from doing what you want to do in life, keeping you from work, keeping you from your family, keeping you from relationships? Are you drinking in isolation? Like I know for my use, I was very isolated. Like we talk about people, in our modern world, we're inside 90% of the time. I could pretty much say I was in the indoors 99.9% of the time. And being just too paranoid to deal with life. So, like if you have a bad habit of drinking or, I think of like things like biting your nails or whatnot. We can do little things. And we're also typically with a bad habit, we're going to be in a stage of change of at least contemplation. So I'm just going to really quick for stages of change. There's
I was just going to say, please go through them.
Yeah. So this is also known as the trans-theoretical model, and it's the developers are Prochaska and Di Clemente, if anybody wants to dive into this topic. But so the stages of change, the first stage of change is pre-contemplative. We're just simply unaware that we need to change. People who typically can, since you brought up alcohol, I'm just going to keep with that example.
Yeah.
You know, they may have a glass of wine with dinner and not finish that glass of wine, where a person with alcoholism can't even fathom someone leaving some wine on the table. Like left, right? Like, what? You're not going to drink that? I'll drink that. You know, or I'll take that. And the next stage of change is contemplation. So contemplation is, all right, I think I have a problem here and I probably need to change my ways, and maybe I will. So, and they might make a pros and cons list, and they'll be back and forth. So this is like the back and forth stage. The next stage of change is preparation, where they're actually preparing for action. Okay, this is a problem. It's evident. It's clear. XYZ is happening, or so-and-so has brought it to my attention. Maybe there was an intervention. Something in the life has really, what we call is clinically is a precipitating event. So something pretty significant happens. So for me to get in recovery, I had a best friend that passed away. That was my precipitating event to put me on the right track. And we all have different precipitating events, but that preparation stage is they're ready. And then the next stage is action, where we're actually taking actionable steps to change. And you know, that is typically a 6-month time frame. So you know, the level of care that I was counseling was intensive outpatient. That was where you know, people are very taking things very seriously. We're in that action stage of change, and then that follows with maintenance, and then that follows actually with termination, where we're done with that. We're done with that. And that's not me saying that addiction has a cure. It can be managed, but within the stages of change, those are the stages. So we have pre-contemplative, contemplative, preparation, action, maintenance, and termination. So going back to what I was saying about the habit. So with that bad habit, you know, I typically am aware of my bad habits, and I can control them, right? So I'm typically teetering in the preparation stage and the action stage.
Right.
And then with the with addiction, you know, I definitely had people in my group that were in the pre-contemplative stage, because maybe they got a DUI and they had to come and they were court mandated to treatment. A lot of people will, you know, well, I don't have a problem. That's just something that happened.
Yeah.
And they might not. I'm not, there's no judgment. They might not, but they had to, you know, go through the motions. And then sometimes that will be a precipitating event for somebody to get some information, and they actually end up coming back to treatment when they're really ready.
Yes.
You know, so everybody's journey is different.
Right.
But, did I answer?
And for someone in an addiction versus just like, oh, I should eat better, or, oh, I should get healthier, right? It's like, would you say the level of support required to move through those stages is higher?
Yes. And actually that is a huge piece, is community. So with changing a bad habit versus addiction, so staying on that, you are going to need a support group around you to keep you from not going back into the addiction. And also, addiction is a life and death disease. We are talking here about the only disease, dis-ease, however you want to say it, that is going to try to convince yourself that you don't have it. It is the only one. Okay. That is, we're fighting a brain disease with our brains, literally. So, you know, that is a huge piece, and it is a life and death disease, and we have to remember that. And the biggest piece, and I argue this is the biggest coping skill that I teach people, is connection. There are many different programs out there, how we can stay connected to people who are like-minded. In the quantum space, we have this saying that, you can't get healthy in the environment you got sick in, or it goes something like that.
Yep.
And that has actually two meanings if you're in recovery from addiction. Because in recovery from addiction, we also cannot get healthy in the environment we got sick in. So if I am in a house where there's, let's say I do 30 days in treatment or something like this, and I go home and I step down a level of care. I'm now in intensive outpatient treatment where I actually get to stay home, but I come back to a home that's still, I got all my alcohol in the hiding spots still, or there's maybe it's just simply not healthy. Maybe I had a roommate that wasn't, is not in recovery, but still uses or still drinks or what have you. Probably not safe to continue living in that situation. So there's that layer, but then, we're going to get to it in a little while, but there's a whole other piece of our environment that we typically don't talk about. And that is our light environment. And that are, two of the biggest toxins being blue light toxicity and non-native EMFs. When I was counseling, I wasn't asking people about that. I was keeping it focused on that piece of, getting, and those would still be the most critical pieces to address, making sure that the home is a safe place to get to, practice your recovery and live your life and feel safe in your environment. Those are pieces, but we do need community around us. So we need to be focused on some kind of recovery. There's lots of rooms out there. There's the rooms of the typical traditional AA or NA, and there are many, many programs that have been derived off those. So the AA and NA are most commonly spoken about because that's evidence-based. And there are many programs that, have started, like Smart Recovery is CBT based. Wellbriety is a Native American way through the 12 steps. There's Buddhist in the 12 steps. There's yoga recovery. There's so many ways we can, get around the people who are like-minded so we could heal. And that's going to be the biggest piece, because it's a biopsychosocial thing, right? So there's the nervous system. We have to get that regulated. And then there's the, our own mental state. So typically, like, we have to address the reasons we were drinking or using in the first place. And then our social environment. Like, I know for me, I had to move away from the people, or I would have continued to use. I just would have. And I probably wouldn't be sitting here talking to you today if I did.
No, probably. Yeah.
So
all of those
I answered
things.
Your question.
Absolutely, you did. And what I love talking about, like, addiction is interesting. Like you were saying, it's like the only disease that tries to say it doesn't exist. We're fighting our brain with our brain, right? But it's also, but it also has, this community, this spiritual component to recovering from it. And so when you're walking through the stages of change and the community and all of the things needed to recover from addiction, what I love about talking about this is that it's still helpful even if you don't have an addiction. Like, all of those, like, understanding these stages and understanding how to live in the world in a place that supports the direction we want to go in, and be around people who share that at least some of the time. And to have the self-awareness and the spiritual connection, these could be helpful for any of the humans.
Yeah, that makes me think of something I always used to say to my patients. And it was, go home and share this with everybody, because everybody could use treatment. Everybody can. Everybody can use the learnings that and that's oftentimes when you hear somebody say, I identify as a grateful human in recovery. So, but when I used to hear people say that, I was like, oh my gosh, how are you grateful that you have this awful, ugly disease? How could that bring gratitude? And it's because it is so in your face, with literally at death's door, that you have to change or you're going to die.
Yes.
In the Alcoholic Anonymous Big Book, it states if this disease will lead us to jails, institutions, or death, and that is 100% true.
Yes.
If we don't address things,
right?
If we don't address,
and that is the big difference. Well, yeah, the principles of recovery are applicable to anybody. The difference is if you have an addiction and you don't go into recovery, the outcome is likely institutionalization or death. Whereas if you just have a bad habit and you don't deal with it, those
you're
things
probably
are
not going to go to
necessary.
jail or
You're
die,
going to be
right?
okay.
Yeah.
You're just going to be, whatever. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So now let's talk about, thank you for walking us through that at the stages of change, differences between like the habit and the addiction. And so we're looking at somebody with an addiction who does engage through those stages of change that you just outlined.
Mm-hmm.
What you have studied and learned about is that there are actually very specific symptoms that pop up for people in the early stages of recovery, which you call PAWS. So tell us what PAWS stands for and tell us what those symptoms are.
Yeah. So this is a topic I'm so passionate about because when I was in the first 8 years of recovery, pretty much, or actually even more than that, probably a little bit over that, I did not know what was going on with me. So what Meredith was just referring to, PAWS, stands for post-acute withdrawal syndrome. And that happens typically in the first 2 years of recovery. So
2 years, because I think of post-acute withdrawal and I'm like, okay, that's when like you feel shaky after, when the substance is leaving the system, or you think about people like sweating and all that kind of stuff.
So that's acute
but
withdrawal.
This is like a whole other thing you're talking about.
Yes.
We're talking months and months and years after.
Yes. So acute withdrawal is more physical symptoms. Few days after we use, we are definitely feeling it physically in our body. And though that acute withdrawal is very physical, and every single drug has a little bit different timeline for how long you're in acute withdrawal. But it doesn't matter what substance you were using, you are going to go through post-acute withdrawal, and that can be anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 years. It's a big time gap, right?
Wow.
Usually,
so this is the substance that you're addicted to, whatever it is physically out of your body, and now you're dealing with everything else.
This is abstinence-based symptoms. These are symptoms you are experiencing because you don't use drugs anymore. Now, I want to just say that the definition of addiction is like 9 pages long. And if anybody wants it, you can just message me and I'll give it to you. But the short definition of addiction is that it's chronic, progressive, primary, and relapsing. So the reason that I bring that up because the PAWS symptoms. So it's a biopsychosocial. And when we are in, these are all abstinent-based symptoms. So when we are in recovery, our body's coming online. Our nervous system has been very damaged. Mitochondria, very damaged. Alcohol is actually the biggest electron thief that there is. So this is, you're going through a lot of symptoms. This PAWS is also something that's very under-researched.
Yeah.
I would argue that it's under-researched because there's so many dang symptoms. Okay. So there's 6 categories of the symptoms.
All right.
So the categories are sleep disturbances, physical coordination problems, stress sensitivity, difficulty thinking clearly, memory problems, and emotional overreaction or numbness. Now, underneath each of those categories, there's a lot of different symptoms that people can go through. when you're a patient in treatment, you're asked about these symptoms every single week, and you're asked to rate them 1 to 10. What I always make sure I tell people, because when you hear that 2 years, you're like, oh my God, how am I going to go through 2 years of these symptoms? Typically, you are not at a 10 on all of the things, right? You're the biggest ones that were problematic in group that people would really discuss, that were the most intense typically, were sleep issues, irritability, anhedonia. That means that you aren't experiencing any feelings. You're just blah. A lot of times that people would call it boredom, but they were actually experiencing anhedonia. Alexithymia, inability to label your feelings. So not even knowing how to, like, I don't know what I'm feeling. Stop asking me. So we would have these things on a list for them to circle or and rate 1 to 10. The other one, another big one, is using dreams, and there's also anxiety, feeling depressed, mood swings, cravings. The physical coordination problems, I would, say that people would feel like really sluggish. And a lot of times people were complaining about the fatigue. That was another real big one. And then just a really low tolerance to stress, being really reactive.
Right.
Like with any little tiny thing, any little tiny change that comes up when life's lifing us.
Yeah.
Right? So
life's like, I don't care if you're in early recovery, I'm going to keep going.
Yeah. Exactly. So there's many symptoms that I'm not, like for me, I actually experienced whole body twitches, and I want to say that happened after well into 2 years. Sometimes they would wake me up in the middle of the night, and it's not like I was experiencing these body twitches like on a constant. It was just like every so often they would happen, and if I was sleeping, they would wake me up. That, like, it was just like my whole body was like a big old twitch. And I don't know if that speaks to my methamphetamine use with a combination of my eating disorder, really just dysregulating my system on a constant basis.
Right.
Or, that was just me personally. This is an N=1 situation. Every single person's journey is going to be different. And you might experience one PAWS symptom for a whole 2 years, where you might experience all the other ones for a pretty short amount of time. Right. So I always like to explain that to people, but
because it's not like, oh, you're going to have all these symptoms all the time for 2 years. It's
right.
Some of them might be at a 2, some of them might be at a 10, and then it might move around. But the process of the recovery on all of those levels you talked about are going to require us to move through some degree of experiencing these symptoms.
Yeah. Now think about when somebody's learning this stuff in early recovery, they may need to learn coping skills for a myriad of symptoms, like a lot of symptoms. That's a lot of learning. That's a lot of behavioral change. We are asking people to change their behavior so they can keep their life on this earth. It's a lot to ask, and it can be really overwhelming for people. So going back to the definition of the disease of addiction, it's chronic, progressive, primary, and relapsing. These symptoms tend to, so if they do get pretty intense, people will return to use, do more field research, however you want to call it. Relapse is another way to say it. And, with any chronic disease, there's remissions and relapse. And when, people get the more and more time that they get under their belt, like let's say somebody's in recovery for 2 years and they return to use for let's say it's just like a day, like they had drinks or whatever came up, and they explore that. Like a lot of people are like, oh, well, now I lost that 2 years. You did not lose that 2 years. That 2 years was, your body was healing. You are doing the work, and you still have that, all of that work that you put in. You did not lose it. So I want to just right now hopefully lift some shame and give some hope to the people who are out there that have, sure, you might change your freedom date or your sober date, however you want to call it. But you had those years that you put in, those are
nothing
very
is
important.
Wasted.
Yeah,
nothing is wasted. It all matters.
Yeah. And you and I would even argue to still say that you're that long in recovery, because you are in recovery.
Right.
Yeah. And that's an important piece that I think that people get so hard on themselves. I was the exact same way. Oh my gosh, I can't even count how many times I relapsed. There were so many times in my active addiction of that 12 years I was using that I was like, okay, I'm done. Well, then I would try to control it. And remember what I said at the beginning, the difference between a bad habit and addiction, you can't control it.
You can't control it.
And
controls
so there was no, I would be like, okay, so I'm going to buy this much and it's going to last me for 2 weeks for sure.
Mm-hmm.
No, you cannot control it. And that's really like a key piece.
Which is why it's like, I don't really believe in all or nothing very often in life, but in this situation, it is all or nothing, right? Because it's like, if you can't control it, it's going to control you. So even having one drink, you're like handing over your control.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And there's, things we can do and put in place. And the longer, so going back to to a thought, the longer we are, in recovery or recovered, however you like to say it, all of that time means something. Yeah. That's all your nervous system being regulated, getting back online. Mm-hmm. But now I know that I believe that people can, if they address their light environment and they really look at this at a mitochondrial level, that some of these symptoms don't have to last as long as they do.
Okay, let's go there. So recovery from addiction requires support on multiple different levels. And now obviously quantum covers everything. So emotional support, spiritual work, that's all quantum. But we're going to talk about it in the specific realm of light now. Mm-hmm. So because this is a level that we could be supporting people who are, well, everybody, as we said, all humans, but especially this could be really supportive to people who are in that post-acute withdrawal phase, is to understand that their mitochondria is talking to their environment all the time. So it's not just not hanging around with the partiers, not having alcohol in your home, like not going to that bar you used to drink at. It's also changing the light environment that you live in, the EMF environment you live in. Okay, so this was something you presented to inside the membership to the QBC graduates, and it was so compelling. So, and you compared the symptoms that you just shared with us, post-acute withdrawal, with the symptoms of circadian dysregulation / blue light toxicity. So maybe quickly read through the PAWS ones and then share with us the symptoms that you researched for blue light toxicity.
So some of the big ones that I was sharing that people would typically, have issues with. So you want me to list off the ones that match? Is that what you're saying? Straight away?
Just read us the categories from the PAWS and then read us the blue lights and we can talk about.
Okay. So I guess I'll just say quick, anyone new. So I'm talking about artificial light at night. So blue light when it's, is it concentrated, has certain symptoms. Well, these symptoms are also PAWS symptoms for someone who's in early recovery. So the list I'm going to list right now, I want you to know it's the same on each side. All right. So if we have a list right here of PAWS symptoms and then a list right here of the blue light toxicity symptoms, the symptoms are the same. So the ones that are there's many that are the same. circadian rhythm imbalance, the lack of dopamine from desensitized receptors, melatonin disruption, insomnia, sleep disturbances, anxiety, restlessness, memory impairment, trouble concentrating. So these things are pretty big ones. And
And those are all symptoms of having overexposure to blue light at night.
Yeah. So if you think
Wow.
about somebody
Okay.
in early recovery who's trying that, okay. So there's a lot here. So for one, when you're in early recovery, your circadian rhythm is imbalanced. I mean, I already mentioned my drug of choice was methamphetamines. So if you're not familiar with that drug, you don't typically sleep much. You're up at all hours of the night.
That's like speed, right? Is that the same?
Yes.
Like what we would call speed?
It's a stimulant.
Okay.
Yeah. And so basically any stimulant was my drug of choice. I was a stimulant user. So I was up for one, many days at a time. So when you think about all the healing and repair we need to be doing at night when we're sleeping, would not happen for like sometimes a week in a row. And so, and I'm also want to just say, like, it doesn't matter what drug of choice we are talking about here. There's circadian dysregulation. I'm not going to talk about we don't have time to go through every single drug and what your lifestyle might have looked like, but we're all different anyways. So there was a whole 6 years of my life where I was sleeping normally. I was using in the day and I was getting sleep at night, because at this point I wasn't really getting high from it. I was just living without having to go through withdrawal. I was fighting the withdrawal for a good 6 years to actually have to stop using the drug. So there is that's a huge piece, the circadian rhythm imbalance. And I'm so sorry, I was going to say other things and I lost my train of thought. I'm sure I'll get to everything, but okay, I remember. So you have somebody in early recovery and they're just getting everything back online and their nervous system is healing anyways. But if they are if they're exposing themselves to blue light at the wrong times of day. So I'm talking about, maybe scrolling on your phone first thing in the morning before sunrise, or staying up into the wee hours, even like after, this isn't wee hours, but like even after, 10 p.m., but also just after sunset in general. I know sunset after sunset is not wee hours, but if you're getting that stimulation from whether it's a TV, whether it's just an overhead light, maybe it's all the things. Maybe you're looking at your phone while you're watching TV with the light on. Like, that's a lot of blue light toxicity. And there's also photoreceptors on our skin that's taking in that messaging. But that is going to also be stimulating your dopamine on a constant firing. So this is also speaking to that healing your nervous system and the neurotransmitters. And they simply are not going to be signaling the pathways that are needed if they are not getting the sunrise in the morning and getting the right light signaling. So when someone is just unaware, they're just simply unaware that blue light's an issue. I mean, I'm talking about light bulbs. We went from talking about very illegal substances to now something that's so simple in our
we all have in our ceilings,
right? Yeah. And so we have to be looking at this. And this is, I believe, one of the biggest things that could actually help someone, getting them to understand that the blue light is actually stimulating the dopamine, and it is going to it's going to keep the sleep issues going on. It's going to keep all those PAWS symptoms, they're going to be ongoing.
Right.
And I don't, there's no research around this. This is my observation, peeps. Like, this is what I'm observing. This is what I can only conclude with all the research that does exist. and
Yeah.
everything that exists with what we know about blue light toxicity, that this is detrimental for somebody in early recovery to be not knowing about the blue light piece, to not know about, how damaging
Yeah.
it can be especially in those early years. But now, like, let's say someone's in long-term recovery. Let's say someone listening is in long-term recovery, maybe, and I've been in recovery for 10 years. I definitely know that it's no PAWS symptoms going on, but I still kind of don't sleep as well as I probably could. Well, as soon as I started blacking out my bedroom, I didn't even wear blue blockers at that time. As soon as I just started doing that, just sleeping in pure darkness, it was helpful. But it was
Yes.
significantly helpful. I would say 10 times more helpful when I was actually preparing myself for bed by actually putting on the proper blue blockers. So for me, it's the orange lenses. For everyone, it's those orange lenses when the sun goes down, because the orange lenses are going to block the full spectrum of blue.
Right.
And the red lenses are going to block the full spectrum of blue and green. But if it's not right before bed, you might not want to pop your red ones on quite yet, because you get sleepy a little too soon. But that was huge. I can only, like, just think about all of the people that went through, the hundreds of people that I helped. If I could have given them all the ones especially that were complaining of the sleep issues, and just not, it would take months for their sleep. Like, we would process this for months before their sleep started to finally feel better. And, like, if they could just know about this information, like the simple blue, or even, like, okay, so purchasing a pair of blue blockers is needed. Let's say we are talking about purchasing nothing. Just being mindful of the blue light at night and not getting that signal could be huge for people. Just that simple thing.
Just understanding, like, oh, if I go and scroll on my phone when at full brightness after sunset, I am triggering all of these symptoms that I'm working so hard to overcome by being in recovery in the first place. Yeah, Andeea, I think these connections you're making are so unbelievably important, because it is, like, getting sober is no joke. It's hard. And if we could help to support that process by having people understand these simple little choices, like not turning on overhead lights, like making your screen red, or not using screens after a certain point, could be so infinitely supportive. And move us to a place where life feels a little bit easier, so recovery isn't so hard. Like, the optimization of the light environment is such a crucial piece. And I'm so grateful that you studied this and drew these connections, because it's truly, like, it could save people's lives.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
Like,
thank
you were
you.
talking about the life and death, like addiction is life or death. Recovery is hard. If this is a way to make it smoother, that could save a life.
Yes, it could. And, not getting sleep, we all, who doesn't like getting a good night's sleep? When we get a good night's sleep, so many other things fall into place. And just that simple thing, just that simple piece is going to be, it's critical. Like, I share that the 3 biggest needle movers, I feel, for someone who is just anyone with addiction, even if you've been years and years in recovery, would be getting the sunrise and getting UVA rise, which is the rise after sunrise, and then blocking blue light at night, are real 3 simple key pieces that I think can really set someone up to really thrive in their recovery, and be able to also possibly be healing other things. Everybody's got other things going on besides their addiction. There might be a plethora of reasons why they were using in the first place, right? Like, maybe they were they had chronic pain and they were using opiates, maybe, and then maybe they had other health issues, and using was how they numbed from those things. So these quantum coping skills, I'll call them for right now, these quantum things that we can learn, the sunlight protocol and the blocking of the blue light, and then also, the non-native EMFs, we're not even talking about those, but those things can really, really set somebody up for success. And I hope everyone who needs to hear this is hearing it.
Yes. No matter where you're at in recovery or not, but especially in recovery. And it's like, people work so hard and they're doing spiritual work, and, behavior change is no easy thing. And it's like supporting our light environment can help that integrate, right? Like it helps, like all this work we're already doing. It's like taking the parking brake off. Like we're holding ourselves back by disrupting our circadian rhythms in ways that I think we're only just beginning to understand.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Andeea, I want to wrap it here because this is so powerful. And please, if you have anyone in your life that this would be relevant for out there, please share this. Andeea's work is so, so important. And you've just articulated it so beautifully. And how can people find you? And how, so you have the podcast, Quantum Recovery, love it. How else can people find you and work with you and go deeper with you if they so choose?
Yeah, my Instagram and basically my handle, if you will, is at Andeea Rae on pretty much everything. And my website is thequantumpages.com is one of my websites. And then I have another one that is AndeeaRae.com. And AndeeaRae.com is where people will be able to find very soon courses. And if, they wanted to work with me one-on-one, all that kind of stuff can be found there. But yeah, if anybody needs to just reach out to me, and that's the quickest thing. Just DM me or email me. I have contact information all over those platforms. So
wonderful. Yes. So if you're in recovery, if you sponsor people, if you work with people, if you're contemplating recovery or in the earlier stage of change, just go for it. What have you got to lose?
Yeah.
Just go for it and reach out to Andeea. And Andeea, you're also starting to share this information at the organization that you work for and training other people to understand it. And, just, I think, really strengthening the toolbox. Recovery is an amazing, amazing process. There's been so much beautiful work done in the world. And I think you're bringing another really important tool to that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Absolutely.
Woohoo! You made it to the end of another episode. Thank you so much for joining us on this exploratory adventure into new realms. Your energy and support are building a different world, and I am so grateful to be on this journey with you. Take care, and thanks.